Some of the big issues is obviously ones that are happening now are just the implementation of the Convention on the Rights of Disabled People, and that covers a whole plethora of issues. And particularly, I think also here now the NDIS and its implementation, and certainly how we can make sure that bureaucracy meets the needs of people with disabilities.
For me and for NIDA, definitely issues around ethnics, the intersectionality, just not disability, but a person as a whole, like the gender, if they come from an LGBTIQIA space, and definitely from diverse communities.
The rights of people with psychosocial disabilities is again another area where we need to be stringent, and we need to push the envelope quite a bit. People are still incarcerated in medical settings because they're deemed to be mad, and we need to ensure that the convention brings them the rights to make their own decisions.
I suppose the first thing that occurs to me is not to look at the outputs of the NDIS. It's all very exciting to see that X thousand people have gone into the scheme as participants, and Y numbers of plans, and this numbers of providers, and so on. But what I'm really interested in at this stage is what is the impact?
I guess to me the big issues involve violence and abuse, which is, in my view, epidemic, and it's a really serious issue. It affects all people with disabilities, but particularly women, which is not so different when you look at the broader community. But there is a lot of violence and abuse that people with disabilities experience in their everyday lives, which definitely shouldn't be there. And also areas like employment, looking at employment agencies, policies around how we support people with disabilities into employment, employee attitudes, all of those really, really important, that's actually a really important area because it gives us independence. If we can get a job, if people can recognise our abilities. So the area of employment and all of the sort of policies around that, public transport and access, there's so many that are important, and I think what this institute can do, it's bringing in so many different people, academics, researchers, organisations, people like myself from all sorts of backgrounds, and just really nutting out, how can we do this better?
We have a shortage of relevant data and evidence base in terms of what are the big ticket items for people with disability. Whilst there's been some studies over the past, they haven't gone into sufficient detail, so it would be great to actually look in depth, come up with a solid evidence base for a range of the issues that people with disability and their families and carers are concerned about, such as inclusion in Australia, such as looking at what's happening with the National Disability Strategy and how can we make that more robust and provide greater outcomes for people with disability and their families and carers.
So I'd love to see more research that involves people with disabilities, so people with disability as collaborators and co-researchers in disability would be fantastic. I'd love to see some more follow-up and outcome data so that all of the data about disability isn't just held within the NDIS. And I'd also like to see outcome data that looks at the economic impact of the NDIS, for example, rigorous research that looks at increasing employment both for people with disability and also for family members, where someone's supported properly and the family member can also return to work. Having
people engaged in the co-design process and also in the operation of the Institute, and that's people with disability actually at the table, so it makes a huge difference, and it's part of that whole purpose of inclusiveness and ensuring that everybody within the community fully participates in things.
What can actually create inclusive employment, what can create, what are the indicators, what can lead to inclusive employment, inclusive communities, affordable, inclusive housing and quality of life and health for people with disabilities.
I think the Research Institute, and I'm quite sure that is what they're planning on doing, is to include people with disabilities in the research. After all, we are the experts.